right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet for sure today, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain, and then you're going to want to pour it straight onto your eyes after this. So I
Or
sent you the
or
link
come
in
out
the
your eyes, as happened
this,
in our experience at some point.
so I sent you the link there because it
Oh,
it
no,
works
no.
better if you
Yeah, I'm
share
not
it
gonna
on
play
your
the
end.
video. I'm not gonna play
Okay.
the video. Okay, so we got Wheel of Time today. If you're here for
Yes.
Wheel of Time, please bear through this next part because Heath decided to make me hurt internally, my heart and everything else today. Because as we know, I'm recovering from surgery, and he showed me a video of your what was it? Urethral what?
Urethral sounding. This was
Urethral sounding.
from
So people taking pleasure of sticking
yeah.
things up their urethra.
I've
And
I've
so
referenced the channel before. It's on I think Thursday's Normal World, and they have a segment they sometimes do called Ask Dr. Steve. He's an actual medical doctor, and they ask him these really weird questions.
don't let this beautiful chiseled appearance fool you. I actually have grown up with a host of medical issues from birth. It was all congenital, and a lot of the things I deal with now are actually downstream of that, including my intestinal stuff, because of blood. When they put a circulatory system rider on your insurance, it's defined as everything the blood touches. And being a physiologist, blood flow is important for healing, but it's also important for
Uh-huh.
development. So my intestines are not the best of specimens out there, even though old Ironsides can handle most spicy foods. I just pay for it later. And uh, so I've been under anesthesia a lot. And when I had my second heart surgery, I was 25 years old. And one of the issues was anesthesia messes with the smooth muscle. So as far as peeing and pooping, they don't want you to leave the hospital till you could do that. And so lo and behold, I had a really hot nurse, and which was fun at first because I came out of anesthesia, and back then I wore glasses, and she was like, "Oh, you're awake." And I said, "Can you give me my glasses?" And I put them on. I'm like, "Oh, you're hot." But later on that day, that became very awkward because I was like, I think I gotta pee. And the answer wasn't to hand me a bottle to pee into. The answer was, stay back. You're not allowed to sit up. She flipped up my little robe, grabbed my thingy, and put it in the bottle. And I'm like, I don't think I'm gonna be able to go while this really hot nurse is holding my thingy and putting it in a bottle. And actually, I'm a little embarrassed that she's hot and it's not doing anything because I just came off anesthesia. So it's a little wet noodle while she's holding on to it. And she's like, "Okay, you can go now." And I'm like,
I don't think I
"Actually,
can.
no, I can't." And that made for a miserable night because I had to pee so much that they eventually had to cath me.
Mm.
So they cathed me, and you were talking about pleasure in this. They go in, and I don't know about pleasurable, but it's not too bad until they hit the sphincter that keeps you from peeing your pants. And then they have to force it through. So the video said all the way up to the urethra. Yeah, there's a thing that's in the way of that. And it's a muscle that is clenched tight so you don't pee your pants. And they force that through, and there's two of those.
Oof.
And then you feel the extreme pain from that happening, and then the bliss from your bladder being removed. And they had to do that 3 times that night.
Oh.
So when I went in to have that redone when I was 37, was it yeah, 2017. Yeah, 2017. I was 37, and I had some things redone. We requested leave the cath in from the initial surgery till the
Mm.
morning after. And then when I can stand up and I can try to urinate on my own. So we actually did that, and that was a completely different experience because I didn't have to go through the process of them shoving that thing up in there. So yeah, if you've never been cathed, you don't know what I'm talking about. And I don't understand what these people are getting out of it unless they're the kind of people that love pain. I'm done with pain for a little bit. Yeah, so we've got
Oh.
25 through 30 of this Towers of Midnight. And actually, this is one of the best sections that we've read
Yeah.
so far in this book.
Yeah. Not that you would know it with our intro of
Well,
pain in the urethra.
that only came up because you wanted to surprise me,
I
and I thought it was little shock jock stuff. So if you stuck through that, come on, just give us a subscribe and a like, because if you stuck through that, you can stick through anything we can come up with. Yeah, sorry it's a little late on a Friday, but we had a lot of scheduling things. It's coming to summer, which is when my schedule gets busier.
mhm.
So we're gonna try to be as normal on this as possible. But I think we got some good stuff for today. And actually, I'm going to start clipping up some other videos because for those that are Wheel of Time, we did that Matrix little monologue. It's about 10 minutes in the last one. So yeah, if I start clipping stuff up, please share those things, man. If we can get a 10
Yeah.
minute clip or something out, people might actually show up for more. We've got a lot to talk about. Our social episodes, it's so tough because we cover so many different topics, but bears and stupid girls, that was a
Mhm.
good one. It was a little bit long, but I think the meme says it all on the intro there. Uh,
I loved it. I loved
yeah,
it.
yeah. So yeah, stick with us, like, subscribe, send us to your friends. We got 67. If we can get 1,000, we can start doing live shows. Oh
Oh
no, no,
yeah.
no. They changed it to 500. If we can get
Okay.
to 500, we can start doing live shows, and that'll be fun because we can
Yeah.
like read the chat while we're doing this stuff. So,
Hmm.
but we got a lot of good comments too from the last time.
Oh,
A
I didn't even
lot of
think about
them,
that.
yeah, a lot of them made me chuckle. So let's
Yeah,
do those first.
I actually your shock jock stuff actually did make me think of something. I had never heard of someone doing this for pleasure, but I did know that it was done for medical reasons, and that this is something I like about Jordan's style. Is he's able to bring you into this kind of gritty medieval world. It's not our modern world, all right? It's, you know, he but he doesn't do it. I haven't read, but I've heard people who've read uh uh how what's the, I don't even remember the name of the books, House of Ice and Fire or whatever it is, the first several books by George R. R. Martin, that he gives excruciating detail on things,
Hmm.
and like
Well, and
uncomfortably so
that's what
sometimes.
attracted people to the HBO series too.
Hmm.
Was it was so raw. It's just like Spartacus too. Spartacus was
Mm,
like what was it, the third episode of Spartacus where they were down in the pit? That one, that episode, there was two episodes where they just kind of set up character development
hmm.
and then they jump into the pit.
Yeah,
And when you jump into the pit after kind of two mundane developmental things,
it's a slap across the
and
face.
then you
Yeah,
got people cutting people's faces off
yeah,
while they're
yeah. It's pretty
alive,
brutal.
and you're just like, okay, things just got real. And
So there, I don't remember which one it was, but there have been several series on the Borgias, which were a very wealthy family out of Italy that was also very powerful and manipulative. And in, I don't remember which network it was that this one was on, but in the first episode, one of the first scenes is with one of the sons, and he's visiting an apothecary because it hurts so much when he pees. Because he's a
syphilis or something.
because he's a rich kid, so he's got
Yeah.
gonorrhea or something.
Gonorrhea, yeah.
So he shows him, well, this is what I'm gonna have to do, and he shows him this tool, and he goes whoop, and then it goes and puts out, like these little flower petal type things, and it's because he's gonna go up in there and then extend it so he can scrape out all the pus.
Yeah.
And I was like,
We'll take the amoxicillin.
just they didn't show it, but just showing the tool, and then kudos to the actor, like he made you believe that that guy was really shoving it up in there, and it's just like, oh, like when you see a
Mhm.
video where someone gets hit square, not a
Well,
deflecting blow, and that guy got hit square in the nuts, and you just, oh, you
I
cringe and
know
you go
now
for him.
the nowadays you get a blood test for STDs, but back in the day they used to shove a swab up in
Mm.
there to get every bit of everything in there and then test it for the STDs. So we have come a long way.
Yeah, thank goodness.
Yeah. Which also, for us men that are becoming of middle age here, they're doing blood tests for prostate cancer now instead of sticking their finger up there.
That sounds much better.
Although my colorectal, who just did my surgery, he's like, "Oh, so we start doing colonoscopies at 45. I will see you next year for your birthday." And I'm like, "Oh, you're lucky I like you, dude. You're a great doctor." No, no,
Did you
actually, I
tell
need
him
to
your birthday was on Valentine's Day?
remind me to talk
Wrong
about
kind of
him when
chocolate,
I
dude.
have my leadership comment.
Okay. Okay.
Because it was the same thing I'm talking about there. So I'll bring him back up.
Well,
I'll plug him. He's actually a good doctor. So
we are on chapter 25,
yeah.
which is page 401 in the first edition hardcover that I've got here. Um, and my leadership thought is here just in a couple of pages on page 405. So I'm curious where yours was.
It's
Um,
just general in the chapter. Yeah.
okay. Yeah, about Rand here.
Yeah.
Well, there's again, I can't remember when we actually get Rand's point of view, because remember, we've had Rand chapters, but we haven't had his point of view since the end of the last book,
Mm-hmm.
when he had his awakening, as it were. Um, and I was hoping we could get all the way through 30. We might not make it through that, but that is when Perrin's story finally catches up with Rand, because chapter 30 is when Perrin sees it from inside the world of
Yeah,
dreams.
let's push to get through
Yeah,
there.
so hopefully we can get to that.
No,
Um,
but what my thought was is kind of a meta thought on leadership, and this is something that we've trashed on Sanderson a lot. But I think he really pulled it off in this chapter.
mhm.
Because what I saw, and it's something I wanted to bring up because of people that we know as leaders now that I've seen in people, is a very tired, kind of resigned leadership. Like I've been working my ass off,
Mm.
and but I'm still here. I'm still here, and I still feel you. It's really hard for me right this moment, but I still feel it. And so I'll bring my doctor up first. I was one of the last surgeries of the day, which was good for prepping purposes because I was able to have my normal bowel movements. I was able to do everything, and I'm used to fasting, so not eating all day wasn't a big deal. But when he got in, the first surgeon that messed everything up, you could tell he just wanted to get me out of his office.
Mhm.
He has a time frame, and he was trying to stick with it, and he was trying to do his job, and he had no bedside manner. My current doctor, the one that is fixing everything, he came in and I could see the tiredness in his eyes because I was probably the 10th surgery he did that day,
Mm.
somewhere around there. And I could see his wariness and it was bringing him down a little bit, but he had compassion for the person that was laying in the bed with all the leads on him and the IVs and everything. And he was honest. He said, we might not be able to fix this today, but I think there's a very good chance, and this is what's going to happen if we do. And he really went through everything. And I could see how tired he was, but how determined he was to do a great job. And that's the sense I got from Rand
And
here.
also understanding the fear of helplessness. That's what
Mhm.
makes medical procedures so scary, is because,
Yeah, yeah, that's why I hate medical contracts is because every
yeah,
patient is under duress. You're making a contract under duress because you wouldn't be there
yes.
if you didn't need to be there. I
Hmm.
wouldn't have been there had this thing not been able to spread and kill me. If it was just an annoyance, I would have dealt with it the rest of my life.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not like, there's a splinter here and it's starting to get funky and I'm gonna have to dig it out. And yeah, that's annoying. It's not fun. It can be painful if you have to, cut in to be able to get in there deep enough to cut it out. And you're not going to a surgeon for that. No, you're going there because something got up inside of you that literally threatened to give you sepsis, which is,
With
for
yeah,
anyone. Yeah.
yeah. And we saw from what he had to cut out that it was very close to it. It was quarters of an inch from my prostate, what he had to cut
Yikes.
into. Yeah.
Yikes.
So yeah, that's pretty serious. But what I saw in Rand here was that same kind of compassion.
Hmm.
And we talk about the difference between empathy and compassion. And where it really played through was if he had been old Rand, he would have killed the guy at the dock
Hmm. That's a good point.
because he
Because
would have
he's
never heard
upset.
him out.
Exactly.
He would
He
have
is
never heard
definitely
him out.
upset when he goes there. That's
But
a
yeah,
good scene.
you see a whole city of people doing the best they can.
Hmm.
And yeah, so the guy who's now the general was a thug because that's the state of what the city was in.
Hmm.
The guy who was holding back the food was actually trying to keep people from dying. And the sea folk are still jackasses, but
Hmm. Yeah, that's
yeah.
true. That's true. All right. Well, before we get there, on page 402, though, I think it's important to remember here, and I think setting the scene for what's going to happen here in Bandar Eben is important because I think this does a really good job of showing what it means that yes, he remembers being Luce Theron, but he still Rand.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Uh because um uh where is it? Which one do I want to do first? Okay. Um so he says so Min is, it's her point of view, so where she's thinking about what she's feeling through the bond, and a crushing guilt more hurtful than the wounds in his side.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, when she was first bonded, all she didn't know how he stood up, because I mean she was there when he got both of them, actually, because she was the one that dragged him inside when she
Mm-hmm.
found
Yeah,
him
in
with
book
that
two.
in book
And then she
two,
and then she was there when
when he
Fane
got the
slashed him.
slice
Yeah.
across that scar. So she was there. So she knew better than anyone other than Rand about those wounds, but of course she couldn't feel them. And then when she could feel them, she literally didn't know how he could stand up. That's how much pain she felt. And remember, that's through the bond. That's indirectly feeling it. Um, but he's feeling the guilt, and what he says is, as they go back and forth, that he's still Rand, um, but he understands now. I don't think Luz Theron would have the crushing guilt. There might be some guilt, but there is that
No,
element.
I think you're wrong there because what broke Lews Theron ultimately
Well, that's true.
was killing his kin.
Well, but Luz Theron understands this kind of a world, because that's where I'll get to in a second here. The guilt is what Rand says out loud is the Sanshin rule better than I. He compares Bandar Eben to
Mm-hmm.
when he was walking through Ibu Dar. So he has all these memories, but he still Rand, not Luz Theron. And I think what what shows that is a little bit farther down. Rand starts talking. They break into gangs, he said softly, shoulders bowing. The rich hire the strong to protect them, to fight away those who come seeking their wealth. But it's not a wealth of gold or jewelry. It's about food now. Uh, he, the way he's saying that, this is how it always happens, is what he said. So he would have seen when the war against the Shadow got real bad and there were losses that,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, suddenly when things become existential, the normal rules of society completely break down. People break into gangs, that money stops being important. It's food and,
Yeah, and
ammunition and medical supplies, these kinds of things.
I think even Rand though would be wise to that by this point because he has seen enough. He's seen what the Dragonsworn done have done.
I just
He's
Yeah.
seen these he's seen both the good and the bad of these authoritarian rules and the fact that you can be overly authoritarian.
Mm-hmm.
Where he says the Shanshan ruled better than I, what you might say from a surface level is, well, their authority is what keeps the peace, But no, it's actually the fact that they say, okay, well, you've sworn you're one of us now. And they leave people be. Their
Hmm.
authority only happens when something really goes wrong. But
Or if you're in that upper crust.
yeah,
Right.
for if
Yeah.
there's strange customs, yes, there is that. But yeah, so it's they have uh what we would call a loose hold. So they're not squeezing the soap so it doesn't pop
Hmm.
out. They have a firm grip without squeezing. And I think that's the balance that it's the old handshake. You know, I've taught Ben this. You have to grip the other person's hand firmly without squeezing, which is a very, very intense skill to have. Because if you squeeze, you're an asshole.
Yes.
But if you don't grip firmly, they will take advantage of you.
Hmm.
And that's the balance he's trying to find here.
Hmm.
But as far as leadership, that tired kind of compassion, it made me think of this isn't a political statement. This is just thinking of back when everything was really bad in Wisconsin and all the stuff was going down, and Trump went there and he hadn't slept in 72 hours. And so he's 3 days without sleeping, and you see him talking to the firefighters and stuff there. I remember those videos, and you could tell how tired he was, but he was still putting on that face of I'm here for you. I'm with you. And another leaders, to be fair and balanced here, that did that so well was Clinton.
Yeah.
And
That's
this is
why he had
somebody,
such a high popularity rating. Yeah.
yeah, and this is somebody I actually want to study more now that I'm learning more about psychology, is I do want to study Clinton more because we look at our leaders and we see so many bad people. Bush, Obama, they were Machiavellian types. You know, Bush wasn't as dumb as he acted, and Obama was playing against the stereotype. So they were actually playing characters.
Hmm.
Clinton might have been just a flawed dude with a horrible wife. That might have been his situation, and I want to actually study that further because from what I understand about him from people who have met him is that he made you feel like the most important person in the room, whether there were just you or thousands of people there. And so that kind of leadership was what I kind of got coming through the pages.
Hmm.
That Trump tired in Wisconsin, that Clinton that seemed to make you feel like he wanted the best for you no
Well,
matter what.
the the specific example of that is on page 405 when Min is Min is watching him do this, and as more and more people are gathering in, Rand spoke. This is down on the bottom of page 405. Rand spoke with many of them, apologizing directly.
You know, also you brought up this movie a couple of times, The Darkest Hour
Hmm.
with Churchill when he was on
Hmm.
the train.
Hmm.
It was that tired compassion that came across.
The
He was there. He was kind of desperate for his own leadership qualities, and so he went to the people. And that's what I get the vibe from here.
something that I think would have been in RJ's mind with this scene, um, if it was from notes or if he had been able to actually fully write it, is Lee, because of, he went to the Citadel,
Hmm.
uh, and which is a Southern military university, and he studied military history, and there's this moment that really illustrates why Lee's men loved him so much and would do anything for him, and that is after the crushing defeat at Gettysburg, after the very few who made it back from Pickett's charge were coming in, Lee rode out to meet them and apologized. He told them, "It is all my fault. You did your best, boys. It is all my fault. I asked more men of. It is all my fault." And they said, "No, no, no." And they were telling him, "No, don't. Stop apologizing. It's you're the general. And he even sent a letter of resignation to Jefferson Davis, and Jeff Davis told him there's no one else. You're it. So at the other, and it's interesting that I'd read this because just before I started reading, I was watching some YouTube videos, and one of the channels, I think I've mentioned it before, it's called the Operations Room, and they do really good animated battle maps of mostly modern military history. And their most recent video was on what's called a Thunder Run, which is this idea that technically it was kind of a new at the time. Technically, you're not supposed to take armor into urban combat. That's you don't do that. That is a big no-no. But somebody had the idea of, well, what if we just don't stop? What if we just go through, smash and shoot and blow up everything and then get out? And so they called it a thunder run. And the first one that went through, um, they they actually didn't lose that many men. There was, I believe, one KIA. I don't remember how many injured. They had to abandon one Abrams, and there were a number of others that were damaged. But at the end of it, the most interesting part to me of the video was, and I wish I could remember his name, the lieutenant colonel who was in charge of that battalion. He literally went to every single man in his battalion and apologized for taking them into such a hot action. That I'm sorry I had to do that. I'm sorry I took you into such a hot action and we got hit bad. And he went to every single. That's a lot. That's a lot of men. That's not as much as if it would have been an infantry battalion, but that's several hundred guys that he's going to individually taking their hand, putting a hand on their shoulder and saying, I'm sorry. And a lieutenant colonel's up there, man. That's, when you're an enlisted dude, you usually don't see much of a lieutenant colonel.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and he made sure to go to every single man. And that I was like, wow, it's amazing that I just watched that video right before I read this chapter, because that jumped out at me. And that's the transformation of Rand. Is I think that's the entirety of this chapter is just putting a nail in that of this is who Rand is.
Yeah, there's some Buddhist philosophy to go with that. Not necessarily Zen Buddhism, but there are other branches off of that. And I think that Jordan has a lot of influence from Eastern culture to go into that, because I was reading Robert Wright's Why Buddhism is True, and he goes into the progression through meditation, right? So Rand actually was meditating with his void in the flame, right?
Mm.
He was pushing the emotions away. He was doing these things. He was coming to this one thing. And that's actually part of their progression model, is you learn to identify when these emotions are coming in and to acknowledge them without them being there. But the problem is he stopped there for a long time. And that's not the final step.
Mm.
The final step is acknowledging them and saying, and looking at them and saying, why did you even appear? And that's when he was on the mountain, is when he finally acknowledged that all of these things from the outside have a purpose. And so we actually got the progression of meditation in Buddhism in Rand, only he did it in the worst way possible.
Yeah. Well, because presumably, and you would think, and this is why I can't wait to get, to the next time. That's why I really liked, I wanted to spend time on those two meetings between Tam and Rand, because it's been so dang long. They hadn't seen each other since the first book. And there's another one coming up. And for anyone who's first time, I don't want to get into it, but I can't wait to get there.
Mhm.
Because I think that's part of why it had to be that way, because presumably Tam would have continued, if Rand had stayed in the Two Rivers, Tam would have continued to teach him. The
Mhm.
flame in the void was just a step, son. Here's what happens next.
Well, Tam might not have been the best teacher at that moment, because
True.
he was struggling between being dad and he learned this as soldier.
That's true. That's true.
And Rand got the soldier part of it, which stays in line with his using it as a tool.
Mm.
And so he thought of himself as a sword, right? And or a spear or whatever he used his analogy. So he only got that part where, okay, I can throw all of these emotions aside because I'm a steel sharp thing going at the enemy. And the next step was the step that Tam needed to make as dad.
Yeah.
And I think Tam struggled with that, because there is a reason for mom. We always harp on the lack of dads, right? But there is a reason for Mom too, and
Yeah,
Carrie Thor did not make it that long.
that's
So
true.
it was a it was an incomplete story for him going into it.
That segues us right into the next chapter, because
Yeah.
chapter 26 is Perrin. And the more I read these, the more I thought how interesting it is, how how parallel Perrin and Rand's stories are. And again, why Rand needed Perrin, but as kind of a literary device, why RJ couldn't leave Perrin there. He shows up at a moment when Rand really needs him, much like Matt is there at a moment when Rand really needs them, but then he's pushed away. And partly because, but it works. It's not a contrivance. It's a device. I want to make that clear, that it's a device, but that doesn't mean it's a contrivance,
Mm-hmm.
because it makes perfect sense within the world, within Rand, who he is, who he has become at that time. No matter how frustrating, bullheaded, pick whatever name Nynaeve calls him, and she's not wrong, but having been inside his head for 6, 7, 8 books, you see why Rand does what he does to push Perrin away.
Mm-hmm.
Even though you, the reader, might be going, why are you sending one of your best friends away? You need him, man. You need a friend.
Mm-hmm.
And that you get some of that. That's the other thing that I really like in chapter 25 is he says that to men, is that, no, I need you because these counselors are all politicians and you're my friend.
Yeah, but earlier in his development, that would have been bad because that human emotion would have been in the way of being the weapon he thought he wanted to be. And so he understood that. So you can understand the bad moves an idiot
Mm-hmm.
makes if you really put yourself in their shoes. Uh,
So on page 416, your Perrin is riding out to meet the White Cloaks, and he's back. Some of it's good, some of it's bad. I don't want to get bogged down on, it's like page 411 to 416, all this stuff going on in his head, and then he kind of finally eventually comes to this conclusion where he does this demonstration where he's like, I'm gonna show you my power, the channelers and the longbows that I have, and then I'm gonna shout out, hey, it's going to be a bloodbath, so why don't we have a chat first, please? um and the conclusion he comes to is the hammer. It you know the the last sentence in Perrin's point of view before it shifts to Galad's point of view is, the hammer could kill or create. He didn't know which situation this was yet. He didn't intend to strike until he did. That's the point of the hammer.
mhm,
That's the point of it as a tool, because he has been fighting for so long the axe. And it's not that the axe is bad, because and that's part of all this back and forth inside his head is, sometimes you need the axe.
mhm,
Sometimes you need the axe. The difference is that is the difference between instinct and conscious choice. So he needed Hopper to, push that button and kind of get him going along these lines. But Hopper couldn't get there himself because Hopper's a wolf. Part of what ended up here, remember, is in an earlier parent chapter. Hopper looked at him and said, you know, fang or claw, what does it matter? You know, axe or hammer, what does it matter? It's a weapon. You're still killing someone or something. Well, to a human, it does matter.
mhm.
And it's not, Perrin got hung up on the thing. Rand got hung up on the thing. And it's the fact that you are a man. And so you can make the choice. You make the conscious choice. And even with the hammer, right? So I had a sledgehammer. If I really needed to, I could cave someone's head in with it when the zombie
Mhm.
apocalypse starts. But usually I use it for pounding stakes into the ground. I make the choice. I use it as needed when necessary.
Mhm. Well, and you stick on Rand, it's sometimes with a hammer you break to build. Like the last time I used a sledgehammer was I broke apart an old porch that was made of concrete to build a new porch
Hmm.
that needed to be built because the old one
Hmm.
was
Hmm.
collapsing. So it's a very deep metaphor that I I really wish Jordan had been able to finish because I think
Yeah,
he
yeah,
really had that. No, but I think in this area, Sanderson did a great job
yeah.
with it, especially him going back and forth with Galad and Perrin
Hmm.
here because you see the struggle inside Galad too, and this is the payoff to a lot of annoying setup with Morgase slash Megden.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
This
But
this
before
is
we
this
get
is the
there,
this, yeah, this is the moment we were setting up for this whole time that we had to slog through.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. But and that's why it's a shame the slog was such a slog because it was building towards something that's actually, you know, pretty cool and interesting and good and all that. But I like just on the very next page, I like how that hammer thought is reinforced here on page 417 down at the bottom, that I got to think this was intentional, and I don't know if anyone else caught this, but Bornhold reluctantly fell into place beside Galad, as did Bayer, whose eyes burned with a wild zeal that matched Bornhold's anger. Bornhold is angry, rightfully so. He's wrong in that Perrin had nothing to do with the death of his father.
Hmm.
But the fact that your father is dead and didn't die, but the fact that your father was killed, that should make you angry. That is something to legitimately be angry about. That is a sharp contrast with Bayer, who is wild zeal. It's the wolf slash human. It's the hammer slash axe. It's instinct versus choice.
Hmm. Well, it's no mistake that actually Bayer uses an axe as his weapon.
That's a good point too.
Yeah.
All right, those were all the thoughts I had on this chapter. Actually, um,
Yeah, let me see. My only other thought was I really identify with Perrin here because his whole reason for being tried isn't to save his people right now. His whole reason for being tried is I'm wrongfully accused. And
mhm.
I want that to actually be finalized.
That's a good point, and that comes up in the next couple of chapters when we get back to Perrin and Galad. Is Perrin makes that point to Fail
Hmm.
in
And
chapter
she
28.
doesn't get it. And I think this is
Yeah,
something
yeah.
between men and women that actually is a sex divide. There's I'm not easy to piss off, but if you accuse me of something I didn't do, that pisses me off. I do enough bad things. Accuse me of one of those, but if you accuse me of something I didn't do, that is something that I will stand on that hill. I will fight on
Yeah,
I will die on
yeah.
that hill, even if it's minor. And this is something that's not minor. This is killing two people, you know. So I actually really identify with Perrin here because that is the thing that if you were to get under my skin, that would be the thing to do it.
You know, and that's a good point, and it's more than just the thing. I just I haven't listened to Ben Shapiro in forever because he got too annoying. But he was on with Dave Rubin recently, and I was like, all right, well let's see what they're talking about. And so I listened to it last night, and he made that point. I can't remember. He referenced I believe a Harvard philosophy professor who talks about this and does this kind of work. And the point was that what has made our politics so divisive is the attribution of motive.
Mm,
That's really what is digging at Perrin's skin. Is it's not that he killed two children, it's
yeah.
that you're shadow spawn.
Yeah,
You
intent
did it
matters.
because you're
That's why I hate this whole woke movement is because microaggressions, your intent doesn't
yes.
matter, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Intent does matter. Intent is
yes.
everything.
Yeah, you're shadow spawn, you're evil because you killed two children. No, I was defending myself and my friends. You killed one of my friends
Hmm.
and threatened others. So that's really what's getting at him, is that from the get-go, the attribution of motive. You did this because, how dare you? You're not in my head.
Hmm.
No, I did this because of this. And it really hadn't even dawned on me until just now. And I guess partly because I was listening to that last night of it's not just that he's falsely accused. And that's the whole point of this trial that we're not going to get to, but we're setting up right now is I'm going to say my piece, damn it, because as a man, I need to do that. But we'll
Hmm.
get there in a second. First, we have to get sidetracked with Egwene. Um,
Yeah, yeah. Well,
sorry,
I
Scott.
also I also did like the moment where Galad recognized his mother
Yeah, that
because
was good. Just
it
well
was
written and
it was
impactful.
well, yeah, it was well written because you're talking about someone's stepmother, but he felt so much love for her that it's actually a testament to her character
Hmm.
because she had every reason to actually push him aside.
Hmm.
He was a
Hmm.
threat
Hmm.
politically to her,
That's a good point.
realistically.
That's a good point.
And she still treated him like a son, even though it was uncomfortable for her. And you see that thought in her head later, where she was actually uncomfortable being a stepmother, especially with his manipulative father, right? So it was that moment where he became a boy all of a sudden, and he couldn't help but embrace her in front of everybody, and then realize after he did it that, oh my gosh, this was awkward.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the Galad we know is the calculated Galad, right? The one that Brian
Hmm.
was talking about. And he did something completely 100% out of emotion,
That's a good point.
and then realized it, and then after he realized it, didn't care because that was his mother. That's Morgase. That's the mother he knows, even though his mother is Rand's mother. But that's another sidebar. I guess the other takeaway from there that people don't get is everybody talks about, oh, well, how did Elaine fall in love with Rand and Min fell in love with Rand and Avienda fell in love with Rand. We're talking about the most beautiful man in the world, Galad, is the same genes as Rand,
That's
almost.
also a good point.
Yeah. so so
I
it,
was thinking about that when I was reading this. That thought popped into my head actually. Um, um, I don't. Does anyone else know that they're half brothers? Rand figured it out because we're actually inside his head in a point of view where it dawned on him. Oh my gosh, that's my half. I'm pretty sure there was a moment specifically where Rand realized that Galad was his half brother.
I believe so. I think it's coming
But
up. I
I
don't
don't
think
know
it's
that
happened
anyone
yet.
else has
Yeah.
figured that out. And I don't know that anything comes of it, which I find amusing.
Yeah.
Because that is, a worthwhile sub. If you want a subversion, there you go. Jordan didn't just write by the numbers, because typically that's not something you leave hanging.
Yeah.
That's a grotesque
Okay.
violation of Chekhov's gun.
Okay. Spoiler for about a minute and a half here. Okay. So if you're first time reader, earmuffs. Okay. This is why I actually think I still like the Abel killing Demandred would have been the best,
Mm-hmm.
but Galad fails in killing Demandred. But it would have been cool to have him have done it and been like, I did this on behalf of my brother. You were always second best.
That would have been kind of funny
So
and
yeah,
awesome. Yeah.
it would have been a good little ending there too. So alternate endings to Demandred's death. We've probably got like 5 of those by now. But
All of
I
which we like better.
I
Yeah.
still think the Abel ending would have been the best with the quarterstaff and
Mm-hmm.
the swordsman playing back to book 3. But but yeah, that would have been another one because we had it. We had the fight with Galad and Demandred. And
Mm-hmm.
realistically, anything up into this point in the books, having Galad as less of a swordsman than Lan is not even in the picture. Galad is he is the best. He beat the best. He's young, he's viral, he's all of these things. And to have ended it that way where he all of a sudden was lesser to somebody else coming in because it was cool, I thought was a not the best.
Yeah. Well, and it kind of undermines, we're kind of skipping ahead here, but in chapter 29, I do really like the section there that's from Morgase's point of view while she's trying to talk to Galad. And there's a moment where she goes,
She's like,
"Holy
oh,
crap, you killed
killed
Valda
Valda.
in a
Yeah.
duel?
Yeah.
My little boy." And you're like, "Well, I guess you're not so little anymore."
Yeah.
There is that there's a genuine shock and realization of, I know I'm looking at a full grown man here, but holy crap, he is a full grown man,
Hmm.
and a dangerous one at that. Um, all right, where was I? I only have one thought in
Egwene.
this
Yeah.
Egwene chapter
Hold on.
27. All right, little hiccup there, so Sam could go pee and then curl up into the fetal position and have a good cry. Um,
Yeah. Unfortunately, you are correct.
that's all right. I had to get an ice pack and baby my neck here because it was a push day, and those always put the most strain. Okay, in defense of Egwene, this is a pretty darn good Egwene chapter. This is if she had been
It
more like
is only
this all
because her
along,
badness is dwarfed by how bad the other Aes Sedai are.
less bad and more just stupid.
Yeah.
Really, which is what she kind of calls them out for in the end is, guys, come on, girls, come on. We just went through this. We just had this. And I love the line on page 433, but I also like that it's not Egwene who says this, because it would have been inappropriate for Egwene to say this, which is where who is it? It's one of her allies, Saren. I suppose someone should ask for the greater consensus, but you've managed to hang yourselves quite efficiently with the lesser rope already. Um, I love the snarkiness there, and it's good for a laugh. But then I also like that Egwene comes back in more seriously and is, hey, we we can't keep going on like this. What she does here is pretty bold and iconoclastic. That, I mean, and the sitters point out this is, and I think Sylviana, says something to the same effect after they leave the hall, is this really changes things. And Egwene's point is, yeah, good. It needed to be changed. The law that the amendment to the law that she proposes here just makes plain sense.
Yeah, it's just transparency. Yeah.
It's just, and we can't even manage that today. It's like I believe the last 4 or 5 speakers of the House all have had come in saying that I'm going to make sure we have transparency, and they all had a different number, but it was like,
Yeah, and the last big spending bill had 12 no votes.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But
That's
no. Specifically, I mean, they have, one of the things they all claimed going in of how they're going to be different is that there would be a certain number of time from when a bill is proposed to when it is voted on.
mhm.
So that, because that was one of the huge criticisms of Obamacare, is we haven't even had time to read this. It's a freaking 1,500-page bill. And
Yeah.
but that keeps happening every
Same
time.
with the omnibus,
Every
same
time.
with all of those things. Yeah. And
Yeah,
that's where people like Gates and are really coming through, is they're pushing for the single item bills.
yeah.
And I don't agree with him on a lot of his more conservative points, as we've discussed in our social episodes, but that I wholeheartedly back him on,
Yeah.
because it's just so ridiculous. It's like, oh, well, they didn't pass this thing that would have helped poor people. Yeah, but you also had a provision in there
It,
that,
yeah.
yeah, is
It really is a window into, you know, the real world, which is why, even though it's such a fantastical setting, it's why the series works, because, oh, we almost destroyed ourselves and thus possibly all of humanity, because we're such an important part of guarding humanity from the shadow, by this scheming and schism.
well,
Let's go back to business as usual.
and it makes you wonder how what Jordan really thought too, because I think he was bitching and moaning a little bit. And as a a Vietnam vet, he probably had some beef
Hmm.
with how things were done because I mean it's not like he's not privy to the fact that that wasn't a legal war. You know, it was a police action, right, in air quotes, right? It's so he probably lost friends
Hmm.
during that time that might have jaded him to the process. And he might have written our Congress into the White Tower in these books.
I imagine so. I mean, you can certainly see it.
Hmm.
You can certainly see, and on the odd chance we have overseas viewers, I would imagine your parliament or whatever it's called is about the same.
Hmm.
That's yeah, all right, business. I mean, you brought up Darkest Hour earlier. Hey, thanks for winning World War II for us. We're gonna vote you out now because we want other stuff. Oh, geez, that sure is a fine thank you.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to you and Scott's point, I do see how if Egwene in her politicking had been more like this more often, I do see how that would have made her more sympathetic because I can see the the authoritarian bent and where that is a turnoff. But this isn't that. This is coming in strong and leading.
Yeah, but it's the I'm going to hold everything that I want to happen deep in my chest until I can get my way. And we see that not only with her dealings with the Hall, where she deceives them, but in the final couple paragraphs of the chapter when she's like, okay, where's Gawain? And Sylviana's like, well, he left like you wanted him to, by the way. And she's
That's
like,
true. That's true.
well, no, I didn't want him to. I was just making sure he was at arm's length until I needed him. How about a little bit of honesty and transparency
Mm,
with the guy you say you love?
that's a yeah. I wasn't glossing over that, but I figured we get back to that when we get to the wherever it is, whichever chapter where Goblin gets the letter that Sylviana wrote.
Yeah, we complain
Because
about
oh boy,
Gawain all the time, but at the same time,
yeah.
he's a dude, and she's the one that had all she had to do was say, "Look, I got this plan. I
Hmm.
need you not to interfere with this part, but I'm going to need you later."
Hmm.
And guess what? He would have been like, "Sweet, that's all I
I'm
needed to
there.
know. I'm there. I'm
I
there
mean,
when you
that's what he
need
was
me."
saying that was what he was saying when they had their argument was I said I have warders for a reason, and that's what I want to be in.
Mhm.
You claim you want me to be your warder, so let me be part of this.
This
Let me
this was
help where you can't.
this was part of the early frustration with Fail, and we came to love Fail in this reread through, at least to some degree. But she always
Mm.
had plans for Perrin that he was not privy to.
Hmm.
And when she started being honest with him, things got better, and that was book 4. And Egwene never reaches that level with Gawain. And Gawain's being an idiot about it. He's being a simp about it. I hate that Sanderson took Nynaeve in that direction with Lan, with basically deceiving him and tricking him into things. But yeah, it's that end of that chapter made me just like, actually, I hit my own head. I was like, yeah, it was not.
Oh, there it is. Okay, it's chapter 29. No, so that segues us into the next bit.
Well, we got
Um,
28. What's
I know. So it bleeds over. I was looking for it. I thought it was here at the beginning of 28 because it 28 starts with Fail. Um, but then the part I was thinking of isn't until chapter 29, but it's
yeah,
kind
but
of
no,
being set up here.
yeah, but
Uh
let's not gloss over that Fael part because this is
yeah.
a good inter exchange between them because Perrin is just so honest with her
Mm-hmm.
and she appreciates that in
Mm-hmm.
this little exchange and then she almost kind of gets it. Almost. She doesn't quite get it, but we get a point of view later. Uh but she almost quite gets it that this is just he needs this for his own personal peace, this trial.
Mhm.
And that's something that she can't understand, but she can't take away from him. So she
Yes.
actually stops arguing with him. And
She does. Yeah, I like that she doesn't get it, but she understands.
mhm.
She can't get it because she's a woman. She thinks differently. As
Well,
he
yeah,
says,
she thinks reputation is everything, as women do, and he thinks my own personal inner feeling is actually more important.
it
Did
it
I do wrong? I actually
yes.
want to be judged. I want to be impartially judged, not from my own opinion. I want to be impartially
Mhm.
judged by someone who hears the facts.
The what he says exactly here on page 438 is it feels good for a man to have his say.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he wants. And just up the page a little bit further, what is she ranting about? Is I you have said this before, and I didn't even think about this when I was reading this, but what has got Fail so mad about Magden slash Morghese? The fact that it
Because
made her look like an idiot.
exactly, yeah, not
It's
because
her
it
reputation.
actually the betrayal
It,
there.
and how does and Perrin responds as a man because he's thinking along male lines, which is where is it? Blah 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 blah. Don't look at me like that, he said. She didn't do it to make you look bad, Fael. She had her reasons. Let it go.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is I'm curious how much of this is Sanderson trying to rehabilitate Fael because he was a fan. So I imagine he even if he wasn't on you know posting on the boards or even looking at the boards, I would imagine the discussions he was having with his nerdy friends were the same that we were having with amongst our nerdy friends. And Fael was not well liked early on.
Yeah, well, and that's an age thing because I and that's actually one of the comments from Scott. He said there is a generational thing
Yeah.
with Sanderson. There is a generational problem. Is I hated Fail when I was
Mm-hmm.
18, which was book 4 basically when I was 18, 19 years old. But I loved Fail as a 40-year-old because she made so much more sense.
Mm-hmm. Well,
And
and what my thought was just in this, page and a half of her point of view here before Perrin goes into the wolf dream is I think part of that generational gap is when Fael thought or talked about having a proper argument, we thought, and kind of what Perrin thought early on, was that meant a shouting match. And that's no fun. Who wants that? I don't think that's ever what she meant. I think that's just the way we took it as youngsters and the way Perrin took
yeah,
it as
she
a
just wanted him
youngster.
to stand up for himself.
And that's what
Yeah.
we see here because she when she tells him that again, it's not that she agrees, but her thought right after he says let it go is that made her feel a little better. It was so nice that he would stand up for himself now. And it so it was never about having a shouting match. It was never about, fighting. It was no, a proper argument is I have my say and you have your say, and we rebuttal back and forth
Hmm.
until we, you know, reach even if we don't reach an agreement, at least we reach an understanding. Um, do you have any particular thoughts on Perrin's wolf dreamness here?
Well, it's interesting because he does go into this what we it'd be a little bit spoiler to say what it is, but his interaction with going through the barrier,
Yeah.
uh, yeah, it's kind of the reaction I would have been like, oh, I can actually just kind of leap through it, and my momentum will take me through it. But Hopper's like, come on, dude, just be yourself, man.
Well, actually, that goes right with my thought was the very end of it, which was, um, I think the beginning and the end of him going through that barrier tie together because he's not wrong of, all right, I don't have time for this. I
Mhm.
understand what Hopper's saying, and I think maybe eventually I could do it. But right now, there's a wolf in there that's about to die, and
Yeah,
I need to
and he
rescue him.
barrels through on the end to pull him
And
out of
then
it. Yeah.
and then at the end, as much as he wants, and this is part of the growth of Perrin here, and part of the importance of Hopper as the mentor, is he wants to go after Slayer. He hates this guy, and deservedly so. Search another time. Slayer is too strong. Perrin took a deep breath. I have to face him eventually, Hopper. Not now. No, Perrin agreed. Not now. Now we practice. That is part of his growth is
Hmm.
he wasn't wrong at the beginning, but he's also understanding now here at the end of, all right, I took the risk. I did because of this. That immediate danger has passed. Now I need to take a breath and recognize that I need to practice. And we're going to practice and practice and practice
Hmm.
because I eventually need to take this guy down.
Yeah, and this is right in line with Buddhist thought too, because it's the difference between inputs, which is all the information coming from our environment, which is what he was dealing with, and what they call essence, loosely translated to essence, where you're applying meaning to those inputs. So like a ring is you say you have a gold ring, but it's your wedding ring. It's a different it's a different thing, right? That gold ring any other time is just a gold ring. You might be able to sell it for a few bucks. But if it's your wedding ring, you wouldn't sell it for a few bucks, right? So that the essence is the meaning we attach to it. And
Mm-hmm.
what he's growing up here is he's learning to be able to see past the essence of what he's putting into the dream.
Yeah. Um, any thoughts on it switches back to Maradon for a minute, and any thoughts on this?
Yeah, this again, this is Sanderson's kind of strength here. He doesn't do well with the speeches, but he did well with the leadership of
Mm-hmm.
Iturralda here. Uh,
It's weird because he does do pretty good with dialogue. It's if someone has a monologue,
yeah, it sucks. Yeah,
it falters.
yeah, it's like go watch Patton again, dude, because
Yeah.
that's what we need.
Or go read
But
the actual speech. The actual speech is even more incredible.
yeah,
You can find the text of it out there.
but
Uh,
my only thing here is Yoli, the guy who stayed behind that swears he's gonna submit himself to death.
mhm.
I thought it was a weird turn that he was trying to learn, because if you're submitting yourself to death, why would you want to learn to be a better general? That was kind of a little bit of an irony there. If so he went through that, that would have been fine, but I would have loved a thought from Iturralde to be like, well, maybe now he's not
Yes, yes.
sentencing himself to death.
Because
There's hope for this young man yet,
what he
kind of
says
thing.
is perfectly in keeping with the little bit of the character we've seen, which is on page 450. My aspirations are not important, but a man would be a fool not to hope to learn. I mean, you can still think you're going to submit yourself and demand execution for what you did, to reclaim your honor or whatever. But also, this guy's a freaking legend. So yeah, sure. But
Yeah,
it would have been
and
nice to just have that little thought from Iturralde of, hey, maybe I can still save this guy.
yeah, well, and also going forward, we've got a book and a half left. What would have been nice in the kind of the wrap up of everything is to see the new crop of generals,
Mm.
because everybody talks
Mm.
about the great captains. They're all old. They're all
Yeah,
dying.
that's true.
And what we could have had is this person been part of the new crop
Mm-hmm.
that's coming forward. So, maybe one per general, someone under what was the Shinarian?
Agomar.
Agomar. Yeah, someone under Agomar becoming one of the new ones. So this Yoli guy coming up as one of the great generals. Brine kind of bringing
Oh,
forward somebody that, or maybe Talmanes becoming one of the new great generals. That would have been nice.
this is kind of a spoiler thought, so I'll save it for later. But when you said that, this ties into your uh into what we've our fan fiction of Demandred. Let me just put it that way. That just gave me a perfect thought of how what we have postulated would have and could have worked. Whatever. All right, moving on.
Okay. Let me write a note so you can remember it.
But
Demandred.
I do I do love what Iterolde thinks here at the end of this, which is this Iterolde thought is why I should never teach tactics.
Yeah. Oh
Well,
no, no, I feel it because that was the hardest part for me as a head coach and everything is
mm-hmm,
I know how I do things,
mm-hmm,
but anybody who's listening to the last 270 episodes of this podcast know I think a little differently than normal people. And as my wife always tells me, don't expect people to think like you do, Sam. Uh, that is true.
yeah,
I am the definition of outside the box, but that doesn't always mean it makes sense. And I tried to coach younger coaches, and I had mixed successes, but at the same time, it was like, don't be me. That's
mm-hmm,
what I have to tell people. Don't be me. You take the things I know and you learn them, and then you be you.
mm-hmm,
And that's a hard thing to teach.
yes.
Yeah.
So what, and that's kind of what Iterolde is saying here, but he doesn't understand how to explain it
Hmm.
because basically what he's telling Yoli and doesn't know how to say into words is that there are rules and you need to know the rules
Well,
and you need to be able to implement the rules.
that reminds me of the Arnold Schwarzenegger speech where he's like, rule number 5, break the rules.
But then you
And it's
need to
like, well,
know,
you have to know
yes,
the rules before you can break the rules.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking that because as I texted you earlier, I couldn't feel my arms because it was the first time in a long time
Holy
I've done
triceps,
Holy
Batman.
Triceps Batman.
Yeah.
And
Invention of
that
mine, by the way. In Holy triceps, Batman.
yeah, that last set I was cheating like heck, but I got through some extra reps because I needed to because I'm trying to build my volume back up. But I know when I can cheat and I know
Me
when
too.
not to. I'm gonna get in so much trouble now.
Oh, oh.
But that's what Iteralde is saying is I have to teach you these rules, but you also have to understand that there comes a time when you break the rules. But you can't go just breaking them just because what he's thinking is you got to trust your instincts, you got to trust your gut. And he has those instincts and he has that gut because he's been at this for decades and
And
he knows all the
this is what I
rules.
always tell people because the word the hardest thing to tell somebody who's young and smart, they have a lot of ability, and you can recognize that is experience matters because then they get
Mm-hmm.
upset
Mm-hmm.
because they're like, I am so smart, I am that doesn't matter. I am wise beyond my years, and you're like, no, years matter
Mm-hmm.
because you have to see things, you have to experiment, you have to play with it, you have to tinker, you have to do all of these things to know what your knowledge is capable of. And young people hate to hear that. They hate it so much. And this is where it or all they kind of I identify with because you look at them and you're like, oh, well, that one liner that I gave you, not necessarily the whole truth. The problem is the rest of the truth you don't know till you've been through like 100 battles. And here's number one for you, by the way.
Yeah, yeah. It's Gran Turismo was surprisingly good. I felt it dragged in areas and it was longer than it needed to be, like most modern movies. But Drinker recommended it, and it was on Netflix, so I
Oh,
gave it a
I've got a meme
watch.
for that.
And
I've been saving it.
that was part of the point of Gran Turismo is, and it's oversimplified, of course, because it's a movie, but it is true that simulations have seriously impacted the way racers train and the way racing works. Why? Because you can experiment in a game. If you have a highly realistic game like Gran Turismo, you can experiment with different lines because when you're going down a track, there are lines that you take that this is the most efficient line of you have to hit this corner going at this angle at this speed so that you then come out like this, so that you then hit the next turn like that. But there's this scene where the dad is asking the son, who goes on to become a race car driver, of why aren't you following the line? He said, because I like to experiment. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but I won't know unless I experiment. So because he was able to experiment, you can't, it's hard, if not impossible, to do that on the actual track, because one, you're risking life and limb, literally, and two, even if you don't, you're risking millions of dollars, because that's how much these machines are worth, these high performance racing machines. But if you do it on a simulation, oh well, now I've discovered something new and interesting. Now let me see if I can do it in the real world. Or you go spinning off and you flip over 17 times and the car's totaled. Oh well, a good thing that wasn't real.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And chapter 29. Now let's get ourselves canceled some more. I love this back and forth between the women. And the
Here we go. Hold on. Spoiler alert if you're watching and you can see this, but this has to do with Demandred. And if you've watched the show, this makes sense.
Oh,
You said he was good in that movie. I'm gonna have to watch the movie.
yeah.
So for those that are just listening, it's Josh Stradowski who plays Rand in the Wheel of Time series. He's in the Gran Turismo movie, and so the meme was Demandred takes up Joe car racing, so he can finally stand out, and then it shows Rand as the racer. So,
Yeah. Oh, poor
poor
Demandred.
Demandred.
Anyway.
Hey, you know what? I'm Mr. Silver Medal, so I actually identify with Demandred a little bit. I got my grades back. I got and we have the slider scale that you can see where you stacked up in the class, and I got second place in both classes.
Nice.
No, it's okay because one of the classes was actually the hardest class I've ever taken in college. So to get an A in that class was I actually, even though I was second, was like amazing to me. And then the other class, I went out on a limb in the final with my research proposals and stuff. And it was very abstract and it cost me a couple points. And I was second by 0.2 of a point. So the fact that I put myself intellectually, honestly out there and still did that well, it was very validating because that's the whole reason I'm there, is to explore this realm.
It's the race simulation before you actually have to start tinkering with real people and
Yeah,
potentially
exactly.
breaking their brains.
Yeah, but the fact that I was so off what the standard is for that industry, but still convinced the teacher that it was a good idea was very validating. So I think we're on to something. But yeah, chapter 29.
Speaking of getting onto something, Bearlane and Fail. Giggity.
Okay, so this was something that the nerds were really on about because it was like Galad has to get with Bearlane. And Sanderson, I don't know. It was very clumsy.
Was it too on the nose, too over the top?
It was too clumsy. Yeah, it was. Yeah. If they were 14, it would have been one thing, but they're like 22.
I actually think what makes it worse is, and this wasn't one of my notes, but actually it stands out now that you mention it. It's not that they were all teenagery and blushing at each other immediately. That's fine, whatever. I think what made it not work and what made it clumsy is that he tries to pretend that nobody else notices. Like Fail, through this whole section, she keeps looking at Bearlane going, what are you up to? What is going on? Rather than just, oh, my stars and garters, you are finally head over heels for someone.
Yeah, well, she makes
because it's so damn obvious
in the middle of the chapter that is like, oh, I wanted her to be up in arms about a guy, but the Lord, Captain Commander, that's just ridiculous. And it's like, no, this is perfect. And
Yeah.
if they would have been more nonchalant about it, it would have been better.
Mhm.
The little bit of blushy scene with in Galad's mind, that was fine.
Mhm.
But then this next whole chapter where she's going on and on and on about it. Oh, maybe I should go over there. Maybe I should do this. Maybe I
Yeah, and
should do
it's
that.
like the
Yeah,
dozenth
and
time she's brought it up, and like, okay, oh come on, she's savvier than that. Come on.
yeah. In fact, the Barrelane we know would have actually treated him more like Matt, but unable to resist.
Hmm.
Where she would have been like, no, he's too pretty. No, he's too this. No, he's too that. But then kind of go back to it.
Yeah, yeah.
That would have been the Barrelane that we grew up with in books 3 through now.
All right, so on page 453, there's a bit of chuckle here, but then it actually leads into an interesting point. So the first bit is they're talking about the refugees who have been sent away, who are either leaving or have been sent through gateways, and Perrin told him to keep quiet because he doesn't want anyone to know where he is and what he's up to. And and someone has the thought women would be still, but of course the men would gossip. They always did.
Yeah.
And of course, from the male perspective, it's the clucking hens. You know,
Mm.
the two women talking over the fence about this and that and that. No, that's why Jordan worked, but now why he has to be canceled is because he was so good at pointing out this male female dynamic that somehow we're at odds and yet we're the same. We just do it differently. Yeah, men gossip. We just don't call it gossip because we don't think of it that way. And women aren't gossiping, they're telling stories. They're updating their friend on what's going on. They're sharing the news. It's like this actually came up in a conversation that I probably shouldn't go into too much detail with, but basically I kind of had to laugh and go, "Oh, I thought this person was just telling you this because you're close friends. She was telling it to everybody." Well, that's interesting, but it's not actually that shocking because guys have the reputation of locker room talk. We talk sex all the time. Well, we talk it a lot, but we talk it very simply, directly, and crudely.
And a lot of times we leave the names out.
Yes,
That's what women don't get is we leave the details of who it is out.
women talk with each other about sex as much, if not more, than men. They just do it differently
Mm-hmm.
because what they're talking about is the relationship, usually. They're talking, yeah, there can be you know, the physical, the simple, was it good or was it bad or whatever, but a lot of
Oh no,
times,
no. I have been privy to these talks because I run boot camps sometimes.
oh boy.
They talk about size, they talk
Mhm.
about everything, how long
Yes.
it lasted. Oh no, with each other? Oh
Oh,
yeah.
they will talk about the gory details, but the reason I say, and there have actually been surveys and studies that show that women actually think about sex more. It's just they think about it longer, which I guess makes sense when you consider the orgasm. But I digress. No, it lines up. But I had a train of thought and then I've lost it with the giggity humor. Where was I going with this? Oh yeah, just the same but different. And this actually, that first bit of the chuckle of the women thinking about how bad men gossip, and a man would be looking going, the heck are you talking about? We don't gossip. We do. We just don't call it gossip. You women are the ones who are gossiping. They do. They just don't call it gossip. Um, that this then leads into um Fael has this thought, and she claims to understand men. This is down at the bottom of 453, but she does. Here's the problem, though. She doesn't understand Perrin. Why?
Yeah.
Because Berlane understands political men. She understands Machiavellian, you know,
No, no, no. I'm gonna go a step further. She understands men that would fall for her behavior.
Hmm.
She understands men in a certain way, which is in general correct. Perrin would not fall for her way, which is why she was absolutely 100% correct when she made the assessment of Matt too much like me. Because had she paid attention to him like she does Perrin, he would have fallen right into it. Which is no shame on him. I would have too, because that's an impressive bosom. Tom would have too, as he made comments with Rizal in
Hmm.
Ibudar, right? It's the standard male she understands because she's used it.
Hmm.
And she's got enough validation that she knows she's correct. The problem is Perrin doesn't validate her theory, but she's so dissident that it's just, oh, he's playing hard to get.
She's so convinced of her own greatness
Mm-hmm.
that she can't see how she could be wrong. And I think that's part of what I was thinking when I said political, because the next part of my note is that she is also very political herself. That is pointed out when we first meet her, is that
Mm-hmm.
she is the leader of this very tiny country that's basically just a city state, and yet she manages to keep this much larger and more powerful nation at bay by being very savvy. Okay. But again, that is why she can't get Perrin, contrasted with Fail, who's his wife, who does get him, which is why she's his wife. And because she's his wife, because she has this thought, which I love this sentence here of so, and again, this is part of me wondering, was this was this there all along and we just didn't get it because we were kids, or was this part of Sanderson trying to kind of rehabilitate Fail's image? Is down at the bottom of page 453, the he was being bullheaded and foolish, but there was a nobility about it, talking about this trial that she thinks is silly, so long as it didn't get him killed. However, she loved him for that very sense of honor. Changing him would be ill advised, so she had to make certain others didn't take advantage of him. I love that line.
Yeah, that's fantastic because it's true. We all have our weaknesses. And to have somebody have your back is different than them trying to change that weakness.
Mm-hmm.
As an individual, I want to shore up my weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
But if somebody tries to like manipulate me into being different, then I'm going to have a knee-jerk reaction to not do it. But that person could have my back and maybe even point out that weakness every once in a while after like a skin of your teeth getting out of it kind of situation. Been like, dude, you did this thing again.
Have I mentioned that?
That's different than don't do that thing. That's I protected you this time, but you do have to realize you did this thing. And that's where Fail is right now. And I think that's the big change from her being kidnapped. The one
Mm,
positive is she's doing that with him more than trying to push him in the direction he needs to
no,
go.
that is also a good point. Is that there, you know, that could that element of Fail could have been there, but it's more pronounced now because she's had a very life changing event.
Hmm.
Their relationship has changed. It has matured because they've gone through this very difficult situation together and come out on the other side.
Well, and we even have her touching the necklace she has.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. I forgot about that. The with the stone from
Yeah,
Roland
from
that she
Roland.
has
Yeah.
as that she sometimes wears as a reminder.
Hmm.
Yeah. That's a good point. That while this is going on, she's thinking about that. So that may be kind of a clue that this is part of her growth. All right. I was about to get a sidetrack, but I'd better not. Let's jump to Galad here.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, Magden Morgaze,
Yeah. So
not
page
not 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 necessarily
457.
Galland. Yeah.
It's talking about Galad, but I love that. this is really interesting to me, and I got to thinking about this, and I'm trying to um I was trying to wonder if I could think of another example of this. So one of the things I rant about is show don't tell. Show don't tell and setup and payoff are the two big things we rant about here, and why we started this whole reread, because the series doesn't do that, the books do. But it's interesting that sometimes Jordan will tell us, but then he'll show us. Because what is happening here in this scene is we are seeing Galad acting exactly like Brian said he would. And Morgase is having these same thoughts, which of course she would, because she's
Mhm.
every bit, if not more, intelligent than Brian is. And this is her son, her half adopted son, that she's raised since he was like 5 years old. So, I mean, she knows this human being. And so he told us that this is who Galad is. And we kind of understood it when Brian said it, but now we're seeing it directly and clearly.
Well, what I love about this scene, and this again, this section that we're doing right now, we're probably going to go 2 hours here again, but this is the best section of Towers of Midnight. This is the best section of Sanderson, period,
Mm,
that we're going through today. And what Morgase did correctly here, that I don't know if Sanderson or Jordan wrote it, but what the way it was written, Sanderson pulled it off really well.
mhm.
Was she let Galad talk through his trouble versus because we see in her head what she wants to say,
Yes,
but she
that's a good
says
point.
something different.
She's
And
being
then
very
Galad says
Socratic.
her own thought back to her.
She's
And
being very Socratic to prod him to get there
mhm.
himself.
Yeah, yeah. So he is actually coming to the conclusion that maybe I don't know everything in his own way, because she's basically talking him through, well, you didn't know all this about Valda, but you still did the right thing,
Hmm.
even though everything you knew wasn't correct.
Hmm.
And so we get into something that should be actually more pronounced in our justice system of perception. Was I feeling threatened at that time, and can I prove that I felt threatened at the time?
Hmm.
And that's what she's trying to get through to Galad is Perrin's actually not a bad dude. And I can't imagine that he didn't feel desperate in that moment.
Hmm.
And that's huge. I mean, he was a boy out of his village for a few days being attacked by white cloaks, and his new friends are being killed. It doesn't matter that they're wolves. They
Hmm.
were there with him, and he was in a strange situation that could drive anybody crazy. We could at least plead insanity right here, right? That
Hmm.
I can actually hear wolves' thoughts. Wouldn't that drive you crazy?
Especially the first time when you're just now learning this.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you don't know how to deal with this.
You don't know how to
Yeah.
deal with anything, and all of a sudden someone's swinging an axe at you. You know, it's a mind fuck, right? So she's letting him talk it out, and I thought that was the dialogue was very very well done there.
Yeah, talk it out, because she thinks several times, and then you kind of finally see it at the end, and she kind of says it is that you have always been a black and white thinker, and you need to understand that the world is full of colors, and that that doesn't mean you're wrong, you're a bad person, whatever. You need to understand the world is full of colors, and you need to take that into account.
Yeah, and for those that
And
can watch, we have some advice from Matt to Galad here. Ooh,
okay,
put some ointment on that burn. For those
speaking
that
of,
can only hear, it was a meme that says Matt saying, "Avoid the Trollocs with stabs because we know they give you trouble."
I had completely forgotten about that part. Speaking of burns, did Sanderson just throw Elaine under the bus here at the very beginning of this? Because there's this interesting paragraph here on page 457. Again, Morgase's point of view, and she's thinking, Galad had always been so solemn, quick to point out when someone did something wrong. But unlike other children, Elaine especially, he had not used his knowledge as a weapon. She should have seen, she being Morghese, she should have seen, she should have realized he'd be attracted to the White Cloaks for their vision of a world that was black and white. Could she have prepared him better, shown him that the world was not black and white, it was even gray, it was full of colors that sometimes didn't fit into any spectrum of morality? So I love the self-reflection of Morghese there, especially because she's been annoying in the past. I love that self-reflection, that and it's so human. It's so, yeah, it doesn't matter to her that she did not birth this child. This is her son. She raised him. She helped raise him since he was, a child, like 5-ish years old, I think. And 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 she's looking at him going, where did I go wrong? Or did I go wrong? Could I have? But then there was that little bit there that I hadn't noticed before of especially Elaine. And I went, oh,
Yeah, that she
Sanderson just
weaponizes
throw
the
Elaine under
yeah.
the bus.
With the way he wrote Elaine in these chapters, which we're about to get to a little bit more of, I wonder if he just didn't like her.
Yeah, maybe. No,
It-
we're about to see that here in a second here when we actually get an Elaine point of view. But the other thing that popped into my mind through this whole section was RFK Jr. talking about his I can't remember if I said this or if I just texted this to you, but the iconic picture from JFK's assassination is John Jr. sitting there with his, saluting the casket as it goes by, and he's only like 5 or 6 years old. And so because of that, I somehow had it in my head that that was RFK Jr. when his dad was murdered. He was like 14, 15 years old.
Mhm.
His dad was murdered. So when he talks about these things, he was old enough to remember. And one of the things he said in that clip that we showed a little bit of last week or the week before from Normal World when he called in and he was talking to him, and he's talked about this before, is that his father, RFK, encouraged debates. That was their dinner table entertainment. It was, you would come to the dinner table, the family dinner table, and we're all gathered around, and it's this huge Catholic family. And all right, we're gonna pick a topic, and you're gonna debate, and you're going to have to prove your point. You're going to have to make your point. And that's what Morghese is. That was the first thing to pop into my head with what Morghese is doing here, was that idea of the dinner table debate of, but then also one of his points was, but you're still family. You still, love and respect each other. It's, son, I love you. I respect, I admire what you have accomplished, but you need to think. You need to stretch your mind. You need to look at things from different angles.
About memory, you talked about the 5-year-old little John. I actually have very vivid memories from 5 years old. And I think trauma plays into that because sometimes you forget because of trauma. Hey, sometimes you forget because of trauma, but sometimes you remember more. And I actually remember the first time I realized that my dad was not with my mother anymore. Because we had moved in, we had just come back from Panama. We lived in Panama for a couple years, and we moved into a trailer on my grandparents' property. And I remember having Cocoa Puffs in the morning, and I remember sitting outside and watching planes go over, wondering which one had my dad in it. And I have a very vivid memory of this phenomenon of watching which plane had my dad in it. But I remember my mom telling me he's not coming back, but one of these will be the one. And so don't discount saluting 5-year-old John Jr. there.
That's true. That's true.
Because sometimes when something is deep enough, then you will remember it. You may suppress it, but you also may remember it. So,
well, before we get to throwing Elaine under the bus or off the top of the Camelin wall, as it were, there's a little bit of Perrin here, and there's a couple little things that jumped out at me in this Perrin section. First of all, I don't know how this hadn't jumped out at me before, and I don't know if this is leftover from RJ or if Sanderson either purposefully or accidentally got it. But uh in page 461, this is Perrin walking with Gaul. Gaul himself had his arm in a sling. He'd fended off his spears, only to have one of his arrows nearly kill him. He'd blocked it with his forearm. When Perrin had asked, he'd laughed and said that it had been years since he'd shot himself with his own arrow. Aiel humor. And it just dawned on me, holy crap, Aiel humor is veteran humor.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're all veterans, because they're a warrior society. I was like, that's why normal people don't get Aiel humor. And I'm wondering if RJ did that on purpose, because it all just kind of clicked, all the different times we've seen Aiel humor and Wetlanders not getting it and me kind of chuckling. And then it was like, I just found this new to me channel called the Unsubscribed Podcast, and it's mostly veterans sitting around. It is incredibly dark humor. The stuff they talk, they don't get very political. So if you
How do
don't
you
want
shoot women
political,
and
you just,
children? Easy. You don't lead them as much.
it's just, it is that kind of stuff. It is hilarious. It's also got Brandon Herrera, who's a big gun YouTuber and is actually running for the congressional seat out in Uvalde, because he lives in the west of SA area. I think they actually filmed their podcast in Bernie. But anyway,
So
so
they're rich if they're in Bernie.
they are very successful YouTubers. They definitely have more than 61 subscribers. Um, but
67. We have 67.
oh, go us. We're awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, two away from the perfect number. Come on, guys. Two of you. Come on, Scott. You've got to have two friends. Come on.
Two friends.
Um, so I'm wondering if that was a conscious thing that RJ did, because every group, every time, because I've been to, like, when I was younger, I've been to VFWs around guys who were in World War II in Korea and Vietnam, and it's the exact same humor as the guys that were in the War on Terror that I watch on YouTube and go, oh, I shouldn't laugh too hard at that, or my wife's gonna think I'm a bad person. It's the exact same humor because of
Yeah.
what they've been through. It's very morbid because you gotta laugh or you'll break.
Well, yeah, I get a little bit of it. Like I'm like I got the defibrillator in the garage, and I'm like, if I go down, the address is up there, and people are like, don't talk like that. I'm like, you get used to it. I mean, I was 4 months old when I had my first open heart surgery. Come on. I grew up, my first 4 months of life
I
were in
mean,
an
attacked by a
incubator.
Mako shark. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
what
yeah.
it
I mean,
was.
yeah, ninjas attacked me in the
You were
in the
trying
the
to save
alley.
school children, and
Yeah.
yeah. All right.
Yeah, but no, you make jokes like that all the time, and people are like, I can't believe you said that. I'm like, I'm the one that could die. Why are you offended?
All right. So, last thing here, and this might be big. I don't know, but I don't
That's
know
what the
how
girls
I've.
tell me.
Oh,
Oh, yeah. And then they find
it
out the
might
truth.
be.
Yeah.
Don't worry. It's not long, but it's really thin. Wait. No.
No,
Oh.
it's short but skinny. Don't worry.
Oh.
Yeah.
Um. I it. I don't think I've ever caught this before. On page 462, his hammer hadn't tried to kill him. So far as he knew, it was the only weapon on anyone's person that hadn't responded to the bubble of evil. What
Yeah,
did?
and I thought that might have been a little too much because he's really trying to push the point of it can be
Uh-huh.
two things. It can be a creator or a, which actually, I spoiler alert, take 30 seconds off right here. Uh, when he does his thing later, building
Mm-hmm.
the thing, it it takes away from the fact that he's grown attached to this hammer.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's like, okay, well now you just created a weapon with the
You
power.
know, I hadn't thought about that before, but like in those terms, but that scene always left me feeling wanting. And I
It
think it
it
is
let me it left
because
me feeling like it was the woohoo moment for Perrin.
It was supposed to be, but I always felt, and I
Well,
hadn't
no,
really
no,
thought about it
I
before. But
woohoo moments are bad for me.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So woohoo
Did
moments, it was like the yeah, woo, we're
I
Jar Jar
think
Binksing this
I don't want
here.
to I don't want to get us off track, so we'll put a pin in that. I think it matters that this is the hammer he got in Dragon Reborn.
Oh no, no, yeah, that is what matters. That's why I hate that
And I
we.
don't know if we get an answer to this question, but I assume it would be because this is the hammer you got in the Dragon Reborn when all you wanted was to go back to being a blacksmith. All you wanted was to go back to Master Luhan's shop.
When Fail actually fell in love with you watching you work.
Mm, mhm.
What are the two most important things of Perrin's life? Is Fail loving him and the fact that he just wants to be a simple man
That's
and he wants to build things.
when he's in the wolf dream, home is Fail.
Hmm.
That's what keeps him grounded to reality, which I love.
Yeah, and what we see in the end of that book was the thing that motivated him to do the big things was to save her.
All right, so let's hurry on to page 463 so we can crap all over Elaine.
Okay, well let me pause this for a second real quick.
Okay. Okay. So I I don't know if it was because I was already on this train of thought because of noticing what Morghese had thought about Elaine. And then you get to the actual Elaine section here, and as she's being carried on this litter up the stairs, and she has this very fleeting moment of concern for the guardsmen who are in armor and high collared coats, and it's really freaking abnormally hot because the dark one is messing with the world's weather. But then she brushes it off, and one of her thoughts is, how often did guardsmen get the honor of carrying their queen anyway? And it's not an ironic thought. No, she means that. And I just thought, is she getting worse? And I wondered, was that her character path all along? And it would kind of make sense because you have the tripod of the boys from the very beginning, of Matt, Perrin, and Rand from the very beginning, and starting with the Great Hunt, it becomes more pronounced as you see their different characters and how they interact and complement each other and help each other. But then you, in that same book, get the triumvirate of the girls, of Nynaeve, Elaine, and Egwene all having to work together, and you see their different
Hmm.
personalities and their conflicts, where they complement each other, where they conflict with each other, where they help and hinder each other. And it just made me wonder if that was kind of the path all along for her, was that she starts off as this, um one of the few moments we praised in the second season was the moment where Elaine takes the blame because these servants shouldn't be punished because ultimately I'm the one in charge. And she takes the blame and the punishment for whatever it was they did there. And and I thought that was one of the few good moments because that's how she was early on.
Hmm. Yeah, and well, it's I think losing the plot a little bit because okay, so you got the tripod of the boys, like you said, and the females, and Nynaeve was the control freak going into it, and she learned, and then we got the person that we've learned to admire from that. Egwene was the lost girl,
Mm,
and she ended up becoming the power hungry control freak.
mm.
And Elaine just stayed the same. She's still the spoiled princess. Where in books, when were they with the menagerie? When she first
Mm.
when she
That was
first bonded Brigitte.
that was book 5, I believe.
Yeah, we were getting a lot of development away from the spoiled princess. And then we're right back to the spoiled princess.
I think that's why it was so jarring because in book 4 and 5, well, really, um, and 6, from the point where Nynaeve and Elaine leave and go off on their own, and that whole journey was, I thought, supposed to be about Elaine had had this tremendous education in politics and culture of the highest court, of one of the greatest courts in the whole land. And now she's getting an education in real life, in how
Yeah,
everybody else
yeah.
lives.
Let me say what I was just saying a little bit better. So Nynaeve, she was overly rigid and opinionated and uh set in her ways of being thrust into kind of the position she was in and having to prove herself. And she learned to be humble. She learned to actually be motherly, which is
Mm,
the trait you want as a wisdom, versus being authoritarian, which is where the direction she was going because of the way people treated her.
mm,
So she actually became a mother, which is, I think, where her role with Rand is. She's very motherly to him, and she is very compassionate, and she learned that, and that's why we love her.
mhm,
Egwene's arc, from the Jordan perspective, and I think we lost it here in the last couple books, is Egwene went from the lost little girl to someone who knows strength. But then she went over the top because it wasn't fully developed before Sanderson took over.
mm,
Nynaeve was fully developed. We already had the cleansing of Satan. We already had all of these things. Nynaeve had reached her development peak, and all he had to do was keep going with it. I think Scott made a comment about Perrin being straightforward. He was developed. He was fully developed in book 4, and you just had to keep going with it. Keep going with it, man.
mm,
And he kind of flubbed that up a little bit, but then Elaine was the princess. She was Princess Leia meeting, meeting Han, and she's learning the ways of the world. And then we went right back to Princess Leia,
mhm,
where she's a spoiled little brat again. And it was only one stuck because it was the only one that was fully developed going into these books, I think. Where I think there's very little forgiveness on Elaine because I thought her development in the menagerie was huge. I think it really peaked with her acknowledgement of Matt after the golem attacked them.
mm.
And if he had just kept going with that, but I don't know. This combined with the Sanderson writing Matt as a buffoon on that tower while she's observing too really ticked me off. This is the only part that I didn't like of the section we read.
Mhm, mhm. I do like Aludra in this scene.
I like Aludra. I just think
Mhm.
the
And
her Elaine's behavior and Matt being an idiot, not putting wax in his ears and all that stupid stuff, was.
yeah, it's like, again, he always takes the joke too far. I
Mhm.
mean, the first time of looking straight down the tube, I actually didn't mind that because, yeah, that seems like something Matt would do. Is, hey, I'm curious about this. I mean, crying out loud, he cut open some fireworks. I'm
Yeah,
curious
yeah,
about this.
yeah.
I want to see what's going on. But he's not an idiot. Yeah, he takes risks. He takes calculated risks, though. It's what I was griping about
Yeah,
with his
the
conversation
the
with
way
Elena.
she describes him waving his hat, it makes me think of that Forrest Gump scene when Lieutenant Dan shows up on his wheelchair and Forrest does the little wave and he jumps in the water and the boat's still going. It's like that's what it made me think of is the way he wrote it. That there it was uh, over the top. Yeah, Forrest Gump was supposed to be over the top. This is a serious book. I'm sorry, there are moments of humor, but The Wheel of Time is supposed to be a serious fantasy novel.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of seriousness, I wanted to point this out because there is what I thought when I read it was people could view it as a potential plot hole. And I did kind of gripe slightly on this that he he does jump a bit of technology when you look at the development of cannons, especially in the West,
Hmm.
of how long it took to go from a gigantic slab of metal strapped down to huge chunks of woods that was not mobile at all, to the field artillery that we think of when we think like Napoleon and the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, that kind of thing. And essentially, that's what Aludra has developed here. However, there is something to be said, and because Elaine has this thought when it first, it doesn't seem like it worked, or she's not sure it's going to work, and it doesn't make sense to her. She has this thought of where is it here on page 466 of had Elaine invested all of this effort to get something that would work more poorly than a catapult? Because she's thinking the the ball is smaller.
Yeah, the
and
extended palm.
and
So
yeah,
so yeah, about 8 or 9 inches. Yeah.
and whereas a catapult or a trebuchet is slinging a freaking boulder. There is something to be said for the practicality of scientific inquiry. And one of the things I love of all the areas of history I love, a really fun one is the history of science, especially uh in the Enlightenment period, like up through to the Industrial Revolution, how we got there, the way people would just tinker and do experiments and say, huh, that's weird. What's that all about? Aludra has been doing this for years, probably decades. It's a little fuzzy on her age, but she seems like close to middle aged. And she probably or she would have started as an apprentice, meaning at like 13, 14 years old, probably.
Yeah, well, let's think of medieval middle age. She's probably in her 30s
Mm-hmm.
because there is moments in previous chapters where Matt talks about how attractive she is.
Mm-hmm.
So, we look at
So
the era they live in.
so
She's
so you
probably in her
can look
30s.
at
Yeah.
about a decade, 8 to 10 years as an apprentice, and then 8 to 10 years as a master, as working on her own, as you know. And when we first see her, she's in charge, right? So she knows her stuff. She wouldn't know F equals ma, right? But she would have an inherent understanding of the concept because she has worked with this stuff for so long. So she would have an inherent understanding of physics and chemistry simply from working with this stuff for years. She doesn't have to show you the math, right? Isaac Newton invented calculus so he could have a math to express what he was trying to
Mm-hmm.
say, right? So that's not what she's doing, and she wouldn't need to. So it it's not really a plot hole when you consider how long Aludra has been working with this stuff, and then how long she's been thinking about how can I turn this into a weapon to get revenge against the Shanshan.
Yeah, I was just reading the history of thermodynamics on was it last night? Maxwell. He was in his early 30s when he came up with the laws of thermodynamics and created the four equations that
Mm,
kind of get us going on that. So yeah, it's insight plus experience, and what we don't realize as a modern generation is people got experience in their late teens all the way through
yeah.
to the yeah when you were 35 as someone living in the 1800s, that's like being 60 now as far as experience.
Um, just for reference, because there's a moment in here where they're talking about reloading and rate of fire. So I went looking for Civil War artillery, and I found a cool site on the National Park Service website, because they are in charge of the national parks that are preserved battlefields, and they have a neat page on artillery in the Civil War, and they say that a good smoothbore crew could fire 2 aimed shots per minute with fixed ammunition. That's
That's pretty
fast.
fast.
That's a lot of kaboom.
Yeah.
However, when firing canister, the rate of fire could be doubled, but this was often at the risk of not sponging the barrel between rounds. So you actually see that the sponging was, well, you're sticking in a bag or pouring in, as they are here, pure black powder. If there's still a spark in there, uh-oh. That's what the sponge is for. If you've ever watched, you know, Glory or Master and Commander or anything like that, where you see old school artillery. That's what that guy is there for, is to make sure you don't blow yourself up while you're loading it. All right. Um,
Let's bring this one home
let's
because
bring this one
yeah,
home.
my butt is hurting and we've been on for like 2 hours. So
Uh, really, the main thing here is Perrin is training more. He's doing more training, blah blah blah. And there's a little bit of there's some Fael stuff there at the beginning that's fine too. But ultimately, to me,
basically, she's just got a plan to get him out of there
mhm,
if things go bad, which is fine. You know, it's just be honest with each other, people. Come on, you're married.
the takeaway to me from this chapter is really the first sentence of when it switches to Perrin's point of view. Perrin was learning not to fear young Bull. And then you actually
Mm.
see that as he's training. He goes from young Bull, the big actual wolf, turning into an actual wolf, and then turning back into himself. He goes back and forth as needed, as appropriate. And I've talked about this before, and from personal experience, that this is the difference between being self-critiquing and being self-critical or outright self-loathing. And that's where he was before. And now with Hopper the mentor, and the other thing, there's another line in here. I think it's here on 471 as well. Yeah, that somehow the more confident he became in the wolf dream, the more comfortable he became with himself in the waking world. Yeah, because you're becoming more comfortable with yourself. You're getting comfortable in your own skin.
Yeah, and that's again bring us back to meditative philosophy is it's the realization that even if you're thinking you're as rational as possible, the underlying motivation is still emotional.
Mm-hmm.
Because why are you rational? Why are you negotiating the best deal? Because it feels good to have the good deal. And you feel guilty if you get screwed. Guilt and feeling good, those are emotions. They're still
Mm-hmm.
underlying what you call rationality. And he thinks he can be rational through everything when realistically, he needs to feel good. He needs
And
to
and it's
feel
why
right.
it's why we highlighted, or last time he has this revelation of, well, maybe I was always like this, but there wasn't anything in the two rivers to annoy me and agitate me and
Hmm.
make me angry. I had a very good, simple life in the two rivers. And then I went out in the real world and people literally tried to kill me.
Well, there's a lesson on social media there because why are people so crazy right now is because we see all the world's problems.
Mm,
When realistically just walk around your house and assess every problem that you come across. It's there's too much dog hair on the floor. It's, oh, I need to mow the lawn tomorrow. It's, oh my goodness, I forgot to get bread at the store today. Whereas you turn on social media and you got war in the Ukraine and bombings in Gaza and Hamas killing people and raping, and you've got serial killers that are making the news in Michigan that you don't even know, and they
oh
kill
my
10
gosh,
people.
there's a teenage girl missing in somewhere not even remotely close to me.
Exactly. Yeah. So you've got all of these things that drive you crazy, as they should. This is not what people need to stop doing
Yeah.
is bad. Did I lose you? Hello?
Oh, nope. Yeah, you hit something and we're really lucky, but you're fine.
Am I back? Hello?
Yeah, I
Okay.
can hear you.
Okay, so I'm back. But no, the the feeling you talked about, what did you say? The girl is missing in
Yeah,
whatever.
some random teenage girl is missing somewhere and it's national news. And
The fact that you feel horrible about that and you want to do something, that's a good thing.
I drove by the fire station the other day on my way to Home Depot to get lumber for my stupid freaking fence. It's pissing me off. Anyway, the flags were
Do
at
you need
half
me to go up
mast.
there and build you a freaking fence?
No, it's a matter of time. I mean, I could do it all at once if I had the time. I'm doing it in sections because, all right, I have time. Let me go get some lumber and fix the section of fence. Anyway, the flags were all at half staff, and I'm going, Why? What did I miss? What the hell is? But somewhere, somehow, something happened that someone thought was tragic, so we should lower all the flags to half staff. And this is a rant I think I've gone on here before. I know I've gone on in real life a number of times because my wife's tired of hearing it. Is the flag of the United States does not go down unless there is a national significance. In fact, next time next time you watch the Olympics, there is one flag that does not dip in front of the the box that contains the country's leaders and whatnot. Every other flag dips to show respect, and we go, hell no, we're America, bitch.
Yeah, people that notice my background would actually, some people would be mad at me that I have the Texas flag on equal level with the American flag. And
There's a reason.
yeah,
Technically, it's the only one that can.
it's the only one that can. Yeah. And so it's, but also if you don't have it well lit, you're not allowed to have it up like that. Either one. Right. So,
Yes.
yeah. So,
A flag that is flying at night is wrong
mhm.
unless you have a light on it.
Yeah. So don't go around my neighborhood because there's a lot of people that miss
Yeah,
that
that'll
point.
trigger me. I'm an old, yeah, old and grumpy. Yep, yep,
Yeah.
yep.
But yeah, it's but some people that aren't Texan wouldn't get it and they would be triggered by that. So it's there are things around these symbols and symbols are important. Symbols are important because they acknowledge an emotional part of yourself.
I mean, that's what the hammer is all about. I mean, that's what
Yeah.
we've been talking about for what book are we on? And Dragon Reborn was book 3, and we are now on book 13. So for
Yeah.
10 books, we've been talking about the damn hammer, but for a good reason, because it matters. It's not just a thing to Perrin. It's not just a tool to Perrin. You know, it is a very real, very important symbol of who he is as a person.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also all of this, and this is why we kind of went longer than we wanted to here, but we really wanted to get through chapter 30 because all of these Perrin chapters here, these several Perrin chapters and all these sections we've had from Perrin's point of view, they were all leading up to huzzah, the last hunt comes and the wolves are ecstatic.
Mm-hmm.
Because what happens, and that is actually something not to gloss over either. One, it's not an accident that it's Perrin who's here. Matt also has this connection to Rand, but it's not an accident that Perrin is the one who is here, because Perrin is also going through a personal, interpersonal, existential crisis, not to the severity of Rand, but Matt, his existential crisis was external. It was because of the dagger,
Mm.
right? But Matt always knew who he was until
Yeah,
the
but
dagger broke part of his brain. It was an outside force.
the
Matt and
problem the
Perrin, or Brand and Perrin, have had to figure out for themselves who they actually are.
But that I think we're getting to something with Matt here soon that is part of the problem is he kind of knew who he was, but now he has to go outside of that because of his character. And
Mm-hmm.
so he is the general. He is the guy that improvises. He is all of these. He's the tactician. He's the thinker. The on the spot thinker, I should say.
Yeah.
The ad libber, you know. But now he's got to go on basically a singular quest.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it's by accident. I think it was a little clumsily done, probably trying to wrap things up. But we get Perrin, who's a loner, and he's in charge of an army at the same time that Matt, who's the general, has to go on a lone quest.
Mm.
Virtually lone. He's got Tom and Noel with him, you know.
That's an interesting point. Yeah.
And so we get those things happening at the same time when one belongs behind the army and the other would like a nice hut in a forge and just to hang out and be with his wife, you know, maybe have a few
Mm-hmm.
kids. Uh, so I don't think that's an accident. I think maybe he held on. I think where Jordan might have gone wrong was he held on too long to have these things happen.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so that's where we get the slogs, is because we had to kind of stall to get there when he probably could have done it earlier. Uh, I don't know how it would have turned out had he done it earlier, because I'm
Hmm.
not the genius writer that he was, but
Hmm.
it's I don't think that's an accident. I think that was on purpose. And then we have it kind of flip back. Spoiler alert, where Matt is in charge of armies again in the end, and then Perrin is doing something solo.
Hmm.
Well, with
Hmm.
Gaul, with basically with him and his buddy, doing something. So it's like the little bit mini pack. Gaul is kind of his wolf brother, you know. Uh, so it's you see this going away from their nature and then coming back to it. I think it just took a little too long, and I think that's probably what throws us off. What is that? What are you laughing at?
I just got sidetracked because I pulled up the comments and I looked
Oh
at the
yeah, yeah, we got to get
first
to
one.
those so we can finish this
All right.
out.
So last thought here, and I've mentioned this before, but I think this section of the Wolf Dream of Parents Practice, to me, this drives home the point of this should have been an animated series. And I've heard
Oh yeah.
Invincible is great, but I haven't gotten around to watching it yet. And that is an animated series on Prime, and I think a lot of what happens here is so fantastical, the stuff that happens within the world of dreams, that it's going to be too dang expensive, or you're not going to be able to, or it's going to be really hard to find the talent, which is why it's going to be so dang expensive to do it properly with CG and practical effects. I think it's so
Theoretically, we're
mind
getting World of
bending.
Dreams in the next season. So
Yeah, I think it's so mind
we'll
bending
see.
that this, much like the ageless face, you can't do that in real life.
You know what I wouldn't mind if they had taken a if they take a page from what's the movie with Robin Williams and Cuba Gooding Jr.? What Dreams May Come.
Yes.
That would, if they can kind of go that route with it, that would be fun,
Yeah,
I think.
we'll
But
see. But I have, I
I don't have
mean,
confidence in that. No,
with how
but
terrible some of those sets looked,
yeah.
but
Oh, the
even more
the
so
ways,
later.
the ways where you can tell it was just a freaking warehouse.
It's like
The lights
season one
turned
of Star
off.
Trek Next Generation. Yeah, holy vey.
Okay.
All right. All right. So that went long. Giggity. So now let's get on to comments, and then
Okay.
I do
Egwene
want to go
was
on to my one spoiler thought before I forget it.
okay. Egwene was being honest. She'd be saying, "I pass on Randall for the Dragon Reborn for this." Yeah, we're saving that meme still. I've read this dozens of times. I agree. The accepted test was a creation of the Terran Grail and the subject's mind. The sister test is manipulated by the observers, which was,
Yeah.
I think, our main point because they actually lost control
Yeah.
in that.
Yeah.
The six-pointed star is a common medieval map illustration. I did not
Oh,
know
really?
that.
I was not aware of that either.
Uh,
But that makes sense.
this one's great. The DNC, or I mean, the tower has been blown completely off course. It hasn't already. It's soon to end on a rocky shore.
That's
So,
extra funny because when you called me, I was in the middle of watching um Dave Rubin interviewing RFK Jr.
oh,
talking about
really? I
talking
have to
about how
watch that
hard,
one.
yeah, talking about how hard the DNC is working to keep him off the ballot everywhere. It's from
Well,
a month ago, but
theoretically,
I
he
missed it.
qualifies for CNN's criteria for that debate too.
Mhm.
So no, but also he's supposed to be in the next couple weeks. I keep looking every night. He's supposed to be on Tim Pool, which who have been super critical of him. And I hope
Mm,
Phil, I hope against hope Phil Labante's on there, because the one thing I've really disagreed with him on, as I'm a big fan of his musically and his online personality, is his take on RFK, and I think he's strawmanning him. I think he's thinking of old Kennedys,
yep.
and his thoughts really don't flow with what actually RFK says. So I would love to see them banter back and forth. And
Not to get a sidetrack, but just to point out before I forget, and we might talk about this more on Wednesday. I finally finished that RFK documentary on Netflix, and I think that's why RFK Jr. was not in that, because they were trying really hard, blatantly hard to connect RFK with modern Democrat politics, and RFK Jr. doesn't fit in that.
No, he doesn't. And that's okay, so maybe this might be the subject for next Wednesday is here's what people don't realize, and a lot of Republicans don't realize right now is the distance between RFK and Trump is very small.
Mm-hmm.
They're both 90s Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
They're both 80s and 90s Democrats. They're
Mm-hmm.
wild America conservatives.
Mm-hmm.
They're not progressive wokies, but they're also not super religious conservative
Yep.
Republicans either. The distance between the two is which party is putting their name on it is what it is the
Yeah.
R next to the name
Yep.
and the I next to the name. And that's one of the reasons I like the whole Trump movement, because it's funny to me that a not Republican is winning the Republican Party.
That's
That's why I want Tulsi Gabbard to be his VP, because you would have a former
I got
Democrat and
lots
a
of thoughts
former
of that.
Democrat.
Let's just all right, we'll do that Wednesday because I got
We'll do
lots.
that Wednesday because that'll be a fun one. Okay,
Let's
so
piss everybody off.
yeah, next comment. I'm truly shocked by the illiteracy and historical ignorance of the current generation. Our school system has been reduced to indoctrination camps. Yes, this
Oh, that
is.
must be this is one of those times where I know exactly what you're talking about, which is what happened in 1914. Oh.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The tower reminds me of the seniors hazing rooks in the movie Dazed and Confused. Excellent movie. Excellent movie.
Well, which was part of my point about going back to the Great Hunt and contrasting the accepted test, which is okay, are you hazing to be an a-hole or are you I think I've mentioned this before. I found a new guy that I don't watch him regularly, but I sometimes watch because he's funny. The channel's called Angry Cops. He's a drill instructor who is also a cop in Buffalo.
Mm-hmm.
Because so he was former active duty, now reserve or National Guard, and he's a sergeant in the Buffalo Police Department. And so he makes that point because one of his longest videos was about you can pay a lot of money to go through these kind of faux boot camps, these faux buds things. And he went off on these guys of, basically saying, we're not yelling just to yell. We're not hazing. We're we're putting you under intense amount of stress for a reason and within certain parameters. That's not hazing. What the novice accepted, Aes Sedai, what all that progression was a stress test. What it has become is hazing.
Yeah. So the class I talked about earlier, that was one of the hardest classes I've ever taken. The review from other students that I know is, oh, she's horrible. She's not fair, blah, 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 blah. No, actually, my takeaway from that class was I had to work my ass off, but this was the material required to learn the skill that she's trying to teach. And she was very adamant about teaching that skill to her students. That's a different kind of hard. Hazing is the professor that prides themselves in how many people they fail. If the material is hard and a lot of people fail, that's completely different. And being an Aes Sedai should be hard because you're a servant to the world. You have more power innate in you than the average individual. So there should be some responsibility with that. Now, but if you take that and you just say, well, I'm going to just make your life miserable because I can, well, you actually didn't learn the lesson. You're part of the problem, which is like the people who were administering the test. I quit caring about the NFL years back. They don't call it the No Fun League for a reason.
Yeah.
Yeah. To be fair to Min, she couldn't know that Elaine would take it to the extremes. This is true. I was a little
Also, to be
unfair
fair
to
to her,
Min.
she was kind of drunk when she spilled the beans on the vision.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, so we will be fair to Min. She didn't know how Elaine would take it, which lets us know everything we've complained about Elaine today.
It's one of the, like, fanfics in my head is I would love to have a scene where Min is with Elaine and actually like, what the hell are you doing, woman?
Yeah.
That's not why that's not why I told this vision. That's not what you're supposed to do with my visions. What are you doing?
Perrin is like the knight chess piece. 2 steps forward, but you have to take a step sideways. Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, which is the virtue of it, it does its own thing and it's a powerful piece, but at the same time, it's annoying to use sometimes. Uh I agree Sanderson had a generational problem. Yeah, I think that's what the big issue
Yeah,
is.
I do think
The
that is his
experience
biggest issue. Yeah.
experiential difference between Sanderson and Jordan was too great. Uh Identifying it adds depth to everything you do. This is the talk I have to the kids that I'm in class with right now because they're like, "Oh, how are you doing so well? Why do you always have so much to contribute?" I'm like, "Because the amount of time you've been alive, take that again, and that's how much I've been alive." And everything we talk about, my mind immediately goes back to, "Oh yeah, that was like this situation," or "Oh, this was like this," or "Oh, I remember seeing that pattern that I'm learning about in a textbook, but I saw it in real life at this time when I was 33, So all of these things, they actually matter because they add context, which adds the more context, and this is actually where I'm going with my research, is the more context you have to something, the better you remember it.
Mhm.
And the more flesh it has in your thought process. And so that's the difference. They don't have the context. They're learning facts out of a book. I'm seeing things in a book that I've already come across. And Sanderson was writing something about topics that he has never experienced. Where Jordan, we know from his war history, he's seen those things. I guarantee you he saw that guy in the battlefield that was crazed and
Mhm.
and doing his thing. And I guarantee you that was a part of his life. That's why it was in there. I guarantee you he's seen love. He was married with Harriet for what, 40 years before he died? 40, 50
40
years?
something, I believe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So he's seen love and he probably had loves before her that were disappointing. He has seen all of these things.
Hmm.
It's Sanderson doesn't seem like he has the world experience of that.
And it shows. It's
And that's not a takeaway from him. That's I mean, congratulations, kudos to your parents for giving you a great life, right? Uh,
yeah,
it's not to take away from him. It just does
but
add
it's
depth.
it's why there's always something off.
Hmm.
It because it is kind of like, we've fantasized, man, what would be like if we had an AI and we could scan in all the millions of words of notes that Jordan had and say, and plus the previous books, and say, okay, now write the ending, right? Who knows what it might come out like, but the way AI is now, something would be off. And,
Yeah.
and we you
Well,
showed that when you played around with it. Is it's so it's the way AI works right now, at least. It always seems to me, especially if it's the longer it goes on, the more it's like, was this written by someone whose English is a second language? So
well,
it's like it's
there's
something's
a
off
there's
and
a
you can't quite put your finger on it.
yeah, there's a depth to experience that it doesn't get. And this is why this is did I tell you the other day I wasn't afraid of AI because of certain things? But
Yeah.
it is an input mechanism with a memory is what it is now. But what we have as human beings is we have our default mode network, which contextualizes everything. And it adds depth to everything we see and everything we hear and everything we learn. It's what allows us to ruminate on things, which is bad, but it also allows us to think on things and apply previous. It's phenomenal, phenomenological consciousness. which is the thing that draws from our memory to add context to the thing we're seeing now. It's if you were to just try to visualize an apple in your head without that part of you, you would have a very vague image. And we've seen this in AI generated images, is they're not perfect. They're not great. Because we have this thing in our head that is really hard to explain, and even the best neuroscientists in the world have trouble with this. We know what parts of the brain fire up, but at the same time, the fact that it exists and when it works is very difficult to explain. But it adds a context that AI doesn't have right now. Now, it may fool you because it can know so many data points that you can't keep up with it, but it doesn't have that underlying contextualization to things that we have trouble explaining, something like love, right? I can give you some explanation for it. I can tell you some chemicals that fire off in your brain, right? That make it hard to say. But at the same time, it's still pretty supernatural to us. You're like, why did I fall in love with that person? They don't have this. They don't have this that I look at. All of these things. But why do I have that feeling towards that person? There are underlying things, but we can't explain it. It's too fast, too much information. We can't handle it, and AI doesn't have that yet.
Mm-hmm.
It's still dangerous because it does have some things that can be dangerous, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not there yet. And I think to get back on point is Sanderson didn't have that depth in his own mind because he didn't have the experience. And I don't think he ever will because he's successful. He's relatively young. What is he, about 5 years, 10 years younger than us?
I think so. Yeah, he's
Yeah,
around
somewhere
our
around there. So
age.
he's
Yeah.
young, he's successful. He's probably not going to feel hardship in his life, which is, I think, important for a lot of the things we talk about. We both have experienced hardship in our lives, and I
Mm-hmm.
don't think Sanderson really has. I think Jordan did, especially if he was at war. You know, we can't even identify with that.
Mm-hmm.
He was there. But if you and you're a better writer than I am. I know that for a fact. But if we wrote about walking out to a ring to get in to fight somebody, I would probably tell the better story
Oh, for sure.
because I can add what was actually there. You
Mm-hmm.
would have flowery words and you might hit some things accidentally.
But it probably wouldn't have the emotional impact because it wouldn't be as real.
It wouldn't be as real. I mean, little
Yeah.
stupid things like when I was walking out to fight Pedro Javier, the kickboxing champion, I was halfway out to the ring and I was like, oh shit, I got to pee. And you wouldn't know to write that in because you weren't there. And I
Yeah.
was, my thought was, I better make this quick because I really have to pee. But I was so nervous before that I couldn't pee in the locker room because I had that nervous bladder because I was so nervous about going out there and people were always talking to me and they were wrapping my hands and the refs were coming out to make sure the wraps were good and all of these things happening at once and you're stretching out and you're warming up and then halfway out to the ring I was like, oh shit, I gotta pee. These are things that you don't think about when you haven't been there.
And then you ate a kick to the gut, so I can't believe you didn't
No,
piss
it
your
was inside leg.
pants.
Inside leg
Okay.
kick. Inside
Okay.
leg kick.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Inside leg kick. Yeah. But I did finish him in 90 seconds about. So that was
Giggity. Oh, wait. No, hold on.
no, that was one of the better. But then I've also lost to nobodies. My last fight was a headliner, and the guy was a substitute from a local gym, and he just turned out to be the worst possible opponent for me because he was Gumby. I could bend him and twist him and beat him and I beat the shit out of him for 2 rounds. And he just kept popping up. Like, okay, let's go. And that was the worst thing for me because I never stop. I never just coast.
Yeah.
And if I had coasted, I would have won that fight, but I kept trying to finish him. And in trying to finish him, even though he just kept popping up, I
Wort.
I
Rope-a-dope
wore
to
out. Yeah.
yourself.
I rope
Yeah.
a dope myself. Yeah. So you never know. And that's a feeling that people don't understand is that anything could go wrong and everything could go right and you still lose. That's a feeling that nobody ever gets. And I don't, that's where I think Sanderson missed
That
is
that makes me wonder how much of that conversation between Morgase and Galad came from RJ. Because I mean, that's what
I
she's saying.
100% think
Yeah.
that that conversation was pre-written because
Yeah.
that is one of the best conversational pieces in the whole series.
Because that is Morgase's entire point there is that son sometimes I mean I didn't talk about it because I didn't want to I but I love the part where she uses herself as the example of so should I be condemned to death? Because I condemned a man to death who I found out a couple years later he didn't do it.
Hmm.
I hanged a man who was innocent.
Okay,
That's life, man.
what was the spoiler you wanted to do?
Oh, real quick, the
Yeah, yeah,
spoiler.
real quick,
You
because we gotta close this up.
There was a perfect opportunity to do what you were talking about having the next great captains because Lan has never been a general, right? That's not who he is.
Mhm.
But we see in his parts of the last battle, he kind of has to start to become one, and he's the one that notices
We
something
saw it
is
in book
off.
5. He was planning with Bale and all of them
That's
in the
true.
tent. Yeah, we saw it.
And he
He
was the
was.
one who went and got Matt to start talking
Hmm.
and realize this guy knows something somehow. Yeah, that's a
Hmm.
good point. So there was a setup for it, and then we see in his parts of the last battle that he could be the one to take over for Agomar, which would have meant he wouldn't have been available to go charging off after Demandred because that's not what a general does.
Mm, yeah, yeah.
So he should have been the one to take over for Agomar once it was realized what was going on there, which meant he's not available to go one-on-one with Demandred.
Hmm.
So it's going to have to be someone else because Lan is busy being a freaking general.
Yeah, I got a meme for that scene, by the way. It involves Nynaeve. I did all these things to get you an army, and then you go soloing after Demandred, basically. Yeah, that was
Yeah, that is
yeah,
another reason that kind of fell flat for me.
yeah,
Well,
yeah, yeah,
we'll
yeah.
have
No,
plenty of time to rant about it when we get there. But next week, uh, Wednesday, we'll talk about how and why everything political is foobar, and then
is it this weekend or next weekend that the Libertarian conference is?
it's pretty close here. I don't remember
Because
exactly.
Trump is going to speak there, but also
Oh,
Vivek is going to debate the vice presidential candidate.
the
Yeah,
libertarian vice president candidate?
yeah.
That's interesting. Let's see how
So
that
I
goes.
can't remember if it's this weekend or the next weekend, but that's exciting because this is first of all, it's going to bring eyes to the Libertarian Party that have never been there.
And young blood, yeah.
Yeah, so Trump is going to speak, RFK is going to speak there, and Vivek is going to debate their vice presidential candidate, which might be like a screen test for if he's going to be the vice presidential candidate.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it's definitely interesting. Trump had apparently said that Vivek was not on the list, but he's doing everything with him right now. So it's
Well, if that happens this weekend, then we can add that to the list. And then next Wheel of Time episode, the next episode is a Matt chapter. The next chapter is a Matt chapter. So I don't remember exactly what happens there. We'll see if it's awful. But the chapter after that, I'm really looking forward to because that is the culmination of the Battle of Maradon, which is again one of the better written
mhm.
and really genuinely fulfilling moments in the Sanderson books. So I am
Yeah,
looking forward to that
and I
one.
think Sanderson read a lot of so he wasn't part of combat, but I think he read at the point he wrote this, he probably read a lot of this stuff on the Iraq War, on
Mm-hmm.
how bad urban combat was. And I think he really did a decent job of writing that into that Maradon
Mm-hmm.
battle
Mm-hmm.
because urban
Yeah.
warfare and regular warfare are completely different animals. You know, and
Yeah.
it was very fresh for us at that point because of Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we will see y'all then.
Right. Later.